We're now to Chapter 13 of Vhymeister and Robertson, Planning Research. So this is just, chapter is just some guidelines on kind of getting going in the research process. This is a nice reminder here that 2/3 of your effort is research, 1/3 is writing. So most of your work will be behind the scenes doing research. The basic steps of research, step 1, defining the problem. In the last chapter we saw the importance of coming up with a specific question to answer. It shouldn't be too general. The problem should point to a gap in knowledge, an unclear situation, an unresolved question, a lack of information, an unknown, a specific question to be investigated and answered, or a problem to be researched and solved. The problem must be clearly stated, whether or not it's a simple problem or a complex one. Exactly what is wrong and exactly what needs fixing. If the question is clear, the answer will also be clear. Step 2, determine the purpose. What to do with the problem. Determining the purpose follows on the heels of defining the problem. It tells the reader and the professor what you're going to do about the problem. If the problem is that there is no information, the purpose will be to find that information. If the problem states that there seems to be a disagreement between two of Jesus' sayings on peace, the purpose could be to try to bring harmony or understand the difference. Some examples of purposes are to reconstruct events of a given historical period, to compare two theories, to organize certain information, to determine the relation between two events, to synthesize, to discover, or to formulate. After completing this step, two things are settled: what the issue is and what is being done about it. The next question is how to go about solving the problem. Step 3, designing a methodology. This is how to go about achieving the purpose, how to solve the problem. How am I going to do this? So you'll have to have a plan of attack for research. Find yourself a library or begin to peruse the websites. A research proposal needs to include the following items. You need to state the background of the problem. This will help the reader to know the scope of the problem and understand the issue. You need to state the problem, give the purpose of the research, and give the significance of the research. It doesn't have to be far-reaching, but a well-prepared paper will be useful to someone. And so you just need to state what is the value of what I'm doing. Fifth, you need to define your terms. If you write a paper on the synoptic problem, you need to clearly define what you mean by synoptic problem. You need to define the limitations of the study. Time might be a limitation. Define the delimitations of the study. These are parameters that the researcher has put on the study. So there will be certain things that will be outside the scope of what you are attempting to study. Show the methodology. Work the outline. We won't have chapter titles in your papers. And then come up with a bibliography, a working bibliography. Come up with a list of sources. In my papers, I have the minimum number of sources I want you to have. And there's not that many, it's usually about 10. you can come up with those 10 sources. I can't stress enough the importance of this little sentence here. The outline is the backbone of the paper. A good outline normally results in a good paper. A poor outline will result in a disorganized paper. So really work hard on your outlines of your paper. And our standard way of presenting papers is we have an outline page with a thesis statement and an outline. And so the grader, the professor, will be sure that your paper follows your outline. There's nothing more frustrating than to have a nice outline and then you read the paper and it doesn't even follow that outline. So work that outline very, very hard. And we'll show you how to do an outline if you are struggling with that. Okay, let's switch to chapter 14 now, finding and evaluating resources in the library. Want to focus on the section called reference materials. Some of the videos we want you to watch will be well-done videos by our librarian, Professor Cox, on using various aspects of the library. So I'm going to leave that part to those videos. And a lot of what I'm skipping through here is covered in that. But here under reference materials, just a word here about Wikipedia, a well-known website. Here is Vhymeister and Robertson's opinion of Wikipedia. For a brief overview of a given topic and some bibliographic references, this is a reasonable place to begin, particularly for factual information on a topic for which you have little prior knowledge. In spite of its bumpy history and early problems with poor editing practices, it has proven to be generally reliable for non-controversial details. However, it needs to be used critically, and important points in your paper should be validated with more substantive sources. So Wikipedia is okay. It's probably a fair place to start research, but I certainly would not use it alone to support some point that I'm trying to make. There's another section in this chapter called evaluating your materials. And a couple of points here. If the source in question is an article, is the journal in which it appears recognized as a specialized and serious journal? So you want to steer away from popular magazines, Time, that sort of thing, Reader's Digest, Ladies' Home Journal. I mean, those kind of non-peer-reviewed magazines are just not appropriate for what we're doing here. And number 11, what is the tone of the writing? Is it sober and objective, or is it emotional? If it's emotional, then it's probably safe to say this is not an appropriate source for your paper. We are looking for sober, objective facts. We're not really looking for articles that are attacking or defending in a polemic sort of way. Is the style of writing clear and easy to read? Is the phrasing concise? Is the vocabulary as simple as the topic will permit? So these are all clues about quality of the source that you're considering. Good research writing is simple and straightforward. If there's an abundance of long sentences and fancy language, that might indicate that the author is hiding behind that sort of language, and the source may not be as good as you might think. Okay, chapter 15, Taming the Internet. So there's a section in here called Evaluating Internet Sources that I want to focus on. So here we go, Evaluating Internet Sources. So here are some questions you can ask yourself when you are considering internet sources. Number one, what is the purpose of the website? Is it an entertainment source? Is it an information source, a research source? Is it trying to sell you something? Answers to these questions will help you decide if this is a good site or not. Who sponsors this website? Is it a school? Is it a university? Or some other credible organization, a professional society like the Society of Biblical Literature or something like that? Or is it a group advocating some position? That's not as good. Is it trying to sell something? That's not as good either. An individual interested in a topic? You might run across some websites that might be useful if the individual is a reputable scholar. Number three, when was the material written? So when was this site last updated? So sometimes that's hard to tell, and sometimes you can't tell. There's no date anywhere. And that's a red flag, I think, if you don't know when something was written. And so who is the author anyway? Is it a professional person? It might be a student. It might be anybody. And so while some of it, might be good, what we're trying to do is, serious research. And so you want serious scholarship. You want to interact with serious scholarship. So if it's a person that you just never heard of, or if they're not willing to put their name to it, I probably wouldn't go there. Does the website have the qualifications of the author, the academic credentials? So that's something to look for there. Is the material available elsewhere? If it's available in a printed source, that's probably a more reliable place to go. What is the tone of the material? Is there an I know it all tone? So is somebody just pushing an agenda, or are they genuinely searching for truth? Are there links from this site to other sites? And so what kind of company does this site keep? So ask a bunch of questions about websites when you are considering using them as a source material. All right, chapter 16, research reading and note-taking. So Francis Bacon once said that some books should be tasted, others swallowed, only a few chewed and digested. So books that are light reading can be finished in a short period of time. Many books needed for research are those that need to be chewed and digested. And so many times that takes time. The search for information demands concentration, determination, and time. Research reading demands that a person understand words, phrases and sentences, paragraphs, chapters, and then the book as a whole. Here's some ideas for successful research reading. Read in an appropriate place with good light and ventilation. You need to be able to be in a place where you can type or write. So in this giant padded chair, probably not the best place. It needs to be a place where you're not distracted. Time of day, whenever you're most alert. Some people are morning people, some people are evening people. Instead of doing reading for 2 straight hours, it's probably better to read for 45 minutes, get up and walk a little bit, and come back and read for another 45, something like that. It's easy to lose concentration after a while. You got to take notes. That forces you to think as you read. So remember, Turabian says, write as you read. And don't wait till you feel like doing it. Stick to a schedule, because you will often not feel like it. So taking good notes, content notes and bibliographical notes. The content notes help you remember what you read. The bibliographical notes remember where you found it. The more time you take taking notes, the less time in the long run that your project will take. And you cannot do good research without taking good notes. Now, it's interesting that both Turabian and Vhymeister and Robertson are complementary of the time-tested and traditional method of note-taking, handwriting on a 3x5 card. Here are the advantages these authors list. A minimal learning curve, flexible working context, the cognitive reinforcement of learning that naturally occurs when both hand and eye are engaged in information recording. So the old note card system is still a pretty good one. But however you do it, make sure it's clear, make sure you get all the information you need, and be consistent in the way you approach taking notes. It's probably a good idea to put a heading on every note card so you know what it's about at a glance. Again, when you're directly quoting somebody, the note card must say exactly what the source said. You can't have any differences, spelling, punctuation, even if there is an obvious grammatical error, you write the quote like that. Now you can note, and it says here how to do that with the SIC Latin phrase, which means thus, in brackets. That means that you have noted that there is a grammatical or spelling error. But the bottom line is, do it exactly like the quote says. And when you are summarizing and not quoting, your note card better be clear on what you're doing. Because a month later, you don't want to look at that note card and wonder, is this a quote or are these my words? One idea per note card is the best way to go. So maybe the bibliographic information on one side, the content on the other, something like that. Here's some more guidelines for quotations versus summarization. When dealing with ideas, you can summarize, but always take care not to distort the meaning or emphasis of the original. When an author expresses an idea with lucidity or in picturesque words better than any other way to express that idea, you probably should quote. In any case, when in doubt, copy the actual quotation. Later, you can decide whether to quote or to summarize. You will be happy to have the full information when you are writing your paper late the night before it is due. So 10 tips for taking notes the old-fashioned way. Use cards of a uniform size. Write clearly on one side only. One idea, one thought, one piece of information per card. Make notes short. Put a heading or subheading at the top of each card. Indicate clearly the source of information. And I would say, content on one side of the card, source on the other, maybe. Indicate clearly whether it's a quote or a summarization or a paraphrase. Summarize as often as possible. Quote when you cannot improve upon it. And be sure and quote exactly how it appears. And then make your notes so clear that if you can't finish your project for some reason, someone could come along and finish it for you. Okay. Chapter 19, there was not a whole lot in that chapter that I wanted to go over. Let's go to 19. I think there was one thing that I wanted to look at. Just a couple of things in 19. No reference notes are needed when the ideas and words in the paper are yours or are common knowledge. So if it's just common knowledge or it's unique to you, there's no need to footnote anything. This section here, that second or later references, we talked about this in Turabian, how you do a subsequent reference. It's the author's last name, the title, and then the page number. And the title is an abbreviated title. You don't put the whole title, you put a shortened version, and then the page number. I wanted to talk about Bible references. I read some things here that I've never read before. She talks about here about using several versions of the Bible in one paper. This practice is frowned upon, and I think that she makes good sense here. I think you should decide on a version of the Bible and be consistent with it throughout the paper. And the reason is if you jump around from version to version, it makes it seem like that one particular version doesn't really support your conclusions like another version. And so it makes the reader kind of think, well, maybe you're forcing some kind of meaning on the Bible. You're making it say what you want it to say kind of thing. So it's probably better to just stick with one version of the Bible and use that version throughout your paper. And I had never thought about that before, but I think that's a good policy to go with. Okay, one last chapter is 22, and 22 is really just a reference chapter that I'm not really going to go over. But this is kind of Vhymeister and Robertson's Turabian chapter. And so a lot of this is just come straight out of Turabian. So, you could use this along with Turabian. But one thing I do kind of like about this is sometimes that they show actual biblical and theological examples that we actually encounter for their examples. And Turabian really doesn't do that. But again, this is just a summary of different kinds of footnotes and bibliographies for a single author or more than one author, or encyclopedia or dictionary, book, journal article. I mean, it's kind of got the whole thing, and it's a little more compact than Turabian. So this might be this chapter here, 22, might be another place to go for some help in footnoting and bibliography. And in fact, I found something in here that I couldn't find in Turabian. It was how to do unpublished works. So I think in here there's a section on unpublished materials like theses and dissertations, or just miscellaneous academic papers. Here were some clear examples of that I really didn't see that clear in Turabian. So you can use, I would say use chapter 17 in Turabian and chapter 22 in Vhymeister and Robertson kind of side by side as far as getting help for footnotes and bibliography. So that's all I wanted to show you out of 22. So that completes this second video of Class 3. Thank you very much.